Today, we're talking about how to get the best image quality out of any DSLR or any camera that you have. I'm gonna teach you everything that I know, so let's do this. What's up guys, my name is Isaiah and I help content creators level up their production game. And today I'm going to be teaching you about the image triad, whether it's in photography or videography. And just a quick overview, there's a basic framework of ISO, shutter, and f-stop. And I'm going to explain to you how to use each one of those and kind of a general overview of what they are and what they do. So regardless of the shooting conditions that you have, whether it's morning, noon, golden hour, or even indoor events where it's dark, or maybe you're going indoor and outdoor, I'm going to show you how to get an understanding so that you'll be able to adapt on the fly and in set environments to get the best image quality possible. And it'll just speed up your workflow and your editing time to bring your project to life and to get the actual desired result that you want. So let's do this. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set our camera to manual. And the reason why we want to set our camera to manual is we want to be able to have complete control over our camera, so our camera isn't doing any automatic work to try and adjust exposure or change shutter speeds or whatever it is. The last thing you want to be thinking about is something changing and screwing up your video or your photo. Next, we're going to cover the 3 points of the exposure triad. And the first one that I like to really set is my aperture. So depending on what you're shooting, your aperture will change, it will vary, but a lot of times I like to use my aperture and try to get it to its lowest f-stop because I want to let as much light in as possible, and I also want that blurry background to kind of separate my subject from the foreground and from the background. Now there is a quick little thing that you should know about this. The lower your f-stop, the more light you let in, yes. The blurrier the background, yes. And having a low f-stop means that a lot more of your image will be out of focus. So let's say you're shooting a car and you're shooting like a 3/4 profile. If you focus on the headlight, the back of the car is actually going to be out of focus because it's on a different plane of your focus spectrum. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially when you're using big subjects or if you're doing close-up headshots. Like if you're at 1.8 and you're kind of like this on like an 18 mil, and this is about maybe like half a foot away from me. If I take a photo at this at 1.8, I can still get a lot of me in focus. But if you're shooting very up close, very tight headshots, you want to shoot at a higher f-stop because that means you'll get more in focus. So you don't want to be shooting at like even like 1.2 and then be focusing right here and then like their jawbone is not very sharp or not very in focus. And that can happen because you're shooting at too low of an f-stop, so not a lot of your image is actually getting in focus. So a great rule of thumb for portraits, you can shoot at f1.2 or f1.8. For automotive photography and kind of like real estate stuff, I would shoot at a higher f-stop. I would say minimum of 3.5, just because you want to get everything in focus. And even for like landscapes, like if you're shooting a wide landscape of like a mountain range, you probably want to shoot at like f14 because there's really no focal point for that. You want everything in frame to be in focus. The second one that I set is my ISO. And the reason why I set my ISO is if I can get my exposure pretty well balanced without touching my shutter speed, then if I'm following the meter, which I'll show you, or actually probably pop up somewhere over here, if you follow that meter and you get it right in the middle, that means your photo is perfectly exposed. And let's say you leave your shutter at 1/50th and then you bump your ISO up to like 1/800. Now knowing that at 1/800th your photo is either a little bit overexposed or just exposed enough, now you can crank up your shutter if you're trying to catch motion and balance out the relationship between your shutter speed and your ISO. Because generally, at least most of the time for me, I like to have my shutter speed at least at 1/25th or 2/50th. That's like a comfortable range for me. And that way I can adjust my ISO and try to get it as low as possible. And worst case scenario, I would have to bump up my ISO to get it perfectly exposed. The reason why I don't like doing that is it starts adding color noise and grain. And what ISO is it's artificial light added onto your sensor. So the more ISO that you add, the grainier and the more color noise that it'll get. So general rule of thumb is to keep your ISO as low as possible so that you can get the cleanest image possible. And between these 3 triads, there's a fine balance that you should kind of find. That's why I like setting ISO, because at least it lets in the most amount of light that I need for my actual image. And that way I have more flexibility in the end to adjust my shutter speed to get it pretty high, just so I know that I have everything in focus. Now there are some images and stuff, like if you're shooting like F1 racing or long exposure stuff, obviously you can have your shutter open for like 1 second or like 1/25th of a second. But for me, generally, I don't really shoot those things. Well, I mean F1 stuff, at least not yet. I would love to shoot that stuff. But generally most of the time I want my things in focus, tack sharp, 1/25th and up for my shutter speed. Last one is your shutter speed. And shutter speed is exactly what it sounds like. It's the speed at which your shutter opens and closes. So the longer your shutter is open, the more light it lets in. The quicker your shutter speed closes, the least amount of light it lets in. And the big thing about shutter speed too is if you're trying to catch something in action like sports or anything like that, if you have a higher shutter speed, you're able to catch more motion in focus. And on the opposite side, if you leave your shutter open, you're able to catch more motion, but you'll get more motion blur. So if you ever see those photos where they have like the cool light trails and stuff like that through the city or on car taillights or whatever, that's pretty much how they do it. They plop it on a tripod, they leave their shutter open for a while, and they just snap the photo and let the camera do its thing. And all the light trails that are moving throughout the image are dragged into the photo to give those really cool light trails. That's a very elementary way of explaining it, but you kind of get the point. And if you don't, leave a comment down below. I'm happy to make a video about it. All right, I didn't want this video to be too short, so I don't know where I'm at in the editing process for my timeline, but here are some bonus tips that honestly that I wish I knew sooner, because if I did, I could have done better, and I could have also been quicker and more efficient in my shooting process. So here are some quick bonus tips to help you cut your learning curve by 5 years at least. So number one, I talked about it briefly, it's the exposure level indicator, and I'll pop that up over here. And essentially the goal is you want to get it right in the middle, because that means that your exposure is not too blown out, but it's also not too underexposed. But generally for some scenes, especially for like the one that I'm shooting right now, mine is usually on the lower end, but because I know how to read my LCD screen, I understand how to read the meters and manipulate them. But as a general rule of thumb, it's always good to try to get your marker right in the middle of the exposure level indicator. Number two is set your picture profile to how you want to shoot. And what I mean by that is sometimes when you're shooting raw, I mean actually a lot of times when you're shooting raw, the photos will come out flatter, and that's normal. But for me, I like to try to get it in camera as close as possible. And the way you can do that is yes, by shooting raw, but also adjusting your picture profile to add a little bit more contrast, add a little bit more saturation, so that in the end process, the presets that you do use, if you do use any presets, it's much easier to edit off of, and it'll kind of just snap onto it, and you'll get those photos every now and then where every preset just works so well on it. So set your picture profile, try to get as close in camera as possible, so that in the editing process, all you have to really do is adjust levels and tweak it to get the style that you want for whether it's your Instagram page or whether it's your brand or whatever it is. Number three is a quick one, shoot raw. Don't shoot JPEG. Raw is better, they're bigger files, but they're way better because you have so much more flexibility and versatility to be able to edit it any way you want. And that actually translates over to video too, but in video they call it shoot log. It's just a flat profile that gives you better dynamic range, and it just gives you more control over the shadows and the highlights and the coloring of your actual image. So shoot raw, it's always the way to go. This is not so much a camera tip, this is more of like a life structure kind of thing if you're trying to pursue this as a full-time career or if you're trying to aspire to it. And the reason why I'm sharing this is if I learned this sooner, I would have created more and not had so much of a scarcity mindset. And here's what I mean by that. One, just save 3 months expenses. The reason why I say that is it just kind of gives you the peace of mind just in case you don't get a deal or in case one falls through or just any emergencies that happen. You have something you can fall back on financially. And the reason why I say that is it gives you more time to focus in on actually creating rather than just trying to take care of the basic necessities. The next point is invest in gear, whether it's buying a new camera or getting a new lens or even getting a new laptop, whatever it is. The reason why I say that is I was the guy who saved so much portions of my money, and even now today, a lot of that money is not even in my bank account anymore. And looking back, the one thing that I wish I did was I wish I would have used that to invest more into creating, because that would have given me more work to show in the end process rather than just having money just to have money, because you can save for the rest of your life and you'll never do anything with it. But the reason to save is to invest it. And when you're responsible and you save smartly, like save 3 months, then after that start investing into gear. After you have your gear, start investing in creating work like spec ads and stuff like that for clients that you do want. And then when you have that portfolio and that base built, then start saving more. Then you can get to that 6 months of expenses. And then after you get your 6 months of expenses, you just repeat the process. You start investing more and you start creating more. And I promise you, the more and more that you create and the more people that see it and the more you share it, the more people will be inclined to bring you on for jobs because you have something to show for it. People don't want to hear words. They want to see what you've done. So that's one thing I would 100% highly encourage you to do, is to create more. And that's something that I still kick myself in the butt about, because the money comes and goes. But when you invest in work, that's something that'll live forever. And that's something that you can actually leverage in your business, even if it's a side hustle to get more business. But that's just something that I wanted to share with you, a little heart-to-heart kind of thing. If you skip through this video and you're kind of already watching it and you're like, I already know how to do all this stuff. If you want to learn how to edit those photos that you did take, I'll add a video to my end card to show you exactly my process of how to do it step by step. So that's it for me, folks. Hope you got some value out of this. Like, subscribe, comment, share this with your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your aunt, grandparents, your cat, your dog. Share it with everybody. But thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Deuces.